If they ever tell my story, let them say, I lived in the time of Achilles.
When I heard that Christopher Nolan is releasing the Odyssey in 26, I was already sold. Just the idea of a mythological epic from him is enough to get me into a theatre. But what really grabbed my attention wasn't just the movie itself, it was a memory. Something I read years ago, in a book that first made me realize just how deep Greek and Indian mythology overlap. The book was called Olympus, written by Indian mythologist Devdutt Patnaik. It was a deep dive into their uncanny similarities, like the story of Sita's birth and eventual return back to Earth, mirroring the story of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, who was abducted by Hades, the king of underworld. The 10-year siege of Troy, mirroring Ram's 14-year exile. The contrast between Achilles and Odysseus, who are central character to both Greek epics, with the rule-following Ram and rule-breaking Krishna, the two incarnations of Vishnu.
Young man came from hunting, faint and weary.
How the primary focus of Odyssey is to record how Odysseus restored balance in his universe.
What is that, my lord, my dearie?
And destroys his wife's suitors, similar to Ramayana. And then it dawned to me that the next year we are also getting a cinematic adaptation of Ramayana directed by Nitesh Tiwari. Two films based on two cultural epics in the same year, directed by two of the best filmmakers of their respective countries. It's going to be a treat for epic lovers next year.
This young man, he died fair soon by the light of my bow, yet I blame.
But because it's a task that no one has been able to do successfully yet, so I went to look at every retelling or reimagining or knockoffs of these stories that I ever saw and understand what they did good and bad, and why no one is able to get them right. The latest adaptation of any of these epics that I watch is the Ramayana anime, released in theatres last month, which, if I'm not wrong, it is the best adaptation of its namesake in its classical form. It's a highly commendable retelling, an astonishing achievement when you take into account that it was made by a foreigner with a little to no incentive for getting it right. Yugo Sako was really different. To invest 10 years of his life researching a foreign story, a documentary filmmaker making an epic animated film with no prior experience in the medium, what kind of man does that? He begins it like a fairy tale, drenched around a mythology, the structure of epics, a story within a story, identifying Ram as someone who can go to any length for someone in need, even taking his father's burden on himself.
मुझे जाने से पहले आपका आशीर्वाद मिल जाए तो बहुत है.
He sees no one as his enemy.
दोष क्यों नहीं देते तुम मुझे? तुम द्रोही क्यों नहीं कहते मुझे?
And fate constantly keeps reminding him that he is special from others. Since encountering Tadka and then again when he lifts the Dhanush, he starts getting constantly harassed by Ravan's family members ever since. Lanka really feels like a hidden fortress in this. The creativity in the character design, production design, and action set pieces are the highlight of this film. But still, if you have seen it, it's evident that the film jumps off many events in the story that many people like me feel essential to it.
मेरे सौभाग्य ने ही मुझको प्रभु राम से मिला दिया.
The lack of Hanuman's backstory make us scratch our heads when his transformation happen, as there is no setup for them, and because they don't go through Bali's arc.
श्री राम ने सुग्रीव को दिया हुआ अपना वचन पूरा किया.
And we don't get any semblance other than Ram's present day stature as to why Hanuman and the whole Vanar Sena is willing to do what they are willing to do for him. Same applies for Lankesh, as the divided nature of his esteemed son Indrajit is also ignored for a black and white portrayal. And because of this, I think Nitesh Tiwari's decision of making it a two-part epic rather than one will be the defining factor this time. Because another film that came last year solved the same problem. Dune by David Lynch was released in 1984, and if you've seen it, it highlights the fact that why it's so hard to make a proper adaptation of such a generational book. Now looking back at it from 2025, it's quite evident that Denis Villeneuve's decision of making it a two-part epic was the right call. The balance between world building and character-driven storytelling is so hard, but, and it's a big but, possible. As documented, Dune follows the same set of rules that Westerners sees as the hero's journey, so it was always going to have similarities with our historic texts. Take Paul Atreides for example, a boy born into a ruling family, much like Ram. When he loses his father and his kingdom, he is reduced to the stature of a commoner by the end of first Dune. Yet driven by intense motivation and with Fremen as his Vanar Sena and the natural power bestowed upon him, he manages to defeat the Emperor of Galaxy. He captures the angst of everyone whose voices are being silenced by the people in power. Ramayana would have felt as revolutionary in its time as Dune feels today. It's not a mystery that different stories can have similar beats. We have been seeing versions of Ram's journey throughout ages. Consider this. It might have been one of the first stories to demonstrate those in power, the kings, aristocrats of that time, that even a commoner could achieve greatness, that action holds more weight than status. With two parts, Dune not only showcases the complex story of its hero, but the supporting characters as well. You get to see the perspective of blind followers, unfollowers, people who want to control him, people who fear him. It's a vivid tale that's showcased on a scale that the story of Ram deserves. But it's not the only story that highlights these themes well. There are many more stories whose roots can be traced straight back to either the Odyssey or Ramayana. And one very close to our homeland that has taken the archetype of Hanuman to the whole world. Just like our first feature-length animated film was based on our historical text, China's first animated film, Princess Iron Fan, was also based on one of their 4 great novels, Journey to the West. The novel is a fictionalized and fantastical account of the pilgrimage of a Chinese Buddhist monk Xuanzang, who journeyed to Nalanda, India in 7th century AD to seek out and collect Buddhist scriptures. The novel retains the broader outline of Xuanzang's own account, but embellishes it with fantasy elements from folk tales. The emperor tasked the monk Tripitaka with journeying to India and provides him with 3 protectors, who agree to help him in order to atone for their sins: Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, Zhu Baji, and Shang Wuzing. The monk and his 3 protectors journey to a mythical version of India and attain enlightenment. Sun Wukong in this journey gains the knowledge of his past and comes to know his real strength. This story was a retelling of Hanuman's journey and how he came to know who he really was in his journey with Lord Ram. This has captured the Chinese imagination for the last 7 centuries, and obviously that means many adaptations. Though there is a great reimagining by Stephen Chow in 1995 called A Chinese Odyssey, but my favorite will be Black Myth Wukong, a game released last year that finally took the character to the whole world. What the creator of this game did for the Chinese heritage and culture building while also providing this kind of entertainment was breathtaking. You get to play as a common monkey who goes on a journey to free Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, after he gets binded in a stone by celestial gods. His impact is so vast that even the creator of Dragon Ball took inspiration from him to craft Goku. Even a Hollywood flick, The Forbidden Kingdom with Jackie Chan and Jet Li, and how can Indians be behind in reframing our great monkey god? K.V. Vijayendra Prasad, 2 scripts revolve around the same character. In Bajrangi Bhaijaan, he becomes a guiding spirit, crossing enemy lines, while in Bahubali, his son weaves Hanuman's image throughout, reshaping Shivudu as his divine reflection. Speaking of monkeys, there was a film that came last year that echoed the spirit of Ramayana in a ways I didn't expect. Here the hero doesn't take the journey to save a princess. Sometimes it's about questioning the very nature of his world, Kingdom of the Planet of Apes. I'm drawn to this narrative because it delves deep into the contrast between spirituality and religion, a theme that I strongly resonate with Indian epics. Though the story is dystopian in a human sense, it also shows apes embodying every human aspect, every emotion. Noah, our lead character, shows his brilliance by climbing the highest peak in his valley for a tribal tradition, one which involves getting your own eagle and growing up with them. The connection between man and nature is quite evidently shown here. But he gets drawn into a conflict when a band of bad apes come looking for a human girl in his village, chanting, "For Caesar!" The people closer to him are taken, so he takes the journey to get them back.
For Caesar.
Now this could have easily been another revenge story, but Noah is a good ape with a good heart, and he gets accompanied by, guess what, another Caesar devotee, who shows him the good side of a religion. Noah, who hasn't known a concept of God, suddenly finds 2 versions of them
was a time
in the same day.
when humans and apes lived side by side.
He crosses a bridge and reaches the castle of a mad king, who is basically unable to complete a yagna that will grant him a mysterious boon, which he even don't know what it is. A genius politician, isn't he?
An ape and human traveling together.
Quite an adventure.
For him, technology and mythology are the two sides of the same coin. They can have the same effect when handled correctly. Noah destroys his castle from inside, but not in the classic Hanuman fashion. He uses technology. It's quite mythological that in the end, it's actually nature choosing who gets to lead the apes. The power of spirituality will beat religion fanaticism any day. Though it was well put, the story does become predictable once you start recognizing its pattern. However, it highlights a crucial aspect of Ram. The struggle is never about revenge. It always has to be something greater than that. Ram never seeks power. The journey and his heritage will provide everything he needs to destroy the evil and save what he holds dear. But not always the hero in this type of stories is a just guy. Sometimes he's a racist too. Ethan Edwards, played by John Wayne, a hardened Civil War veteran, spends years searching for his kidnapped niece, Debbie, who was taken by a Comanche chief, Scar. Scar is a powerful enemy from a different culture. Like Raavan, Scar has his own tragic motivations, but he still takes Debbie and raises her among his people. Ethan is opposite to Ram in every aspect. He is deeply flawed, racist, and vengeful.
Why don't you finish the job?
But he undergoes a transformation by the end. When he finally finds Debbie, instead of killing her as he does with every Comanche, he lifts her up in a gesture that lifts the emotional weight he's carrying throughout. Can someone who has lived with the enemy ever truly return? Devi's fate mirrors Sita in that both are judged by their own people for having been with their captors. It's a story that showcases deep racial undertones, which was made in the dying days of classic Western, which faltered when Indians ceased to be typecast as savages.
That'll be the day.
This portrayal of evil that we find at the end of Journey turns out to be a mirror on ourselves. It's something that Mani Ratnam grappled with in Raavan. A very postmodern take on the source material, which exudes in its every frame. The story is of Bira, who from the point of view of Ragini is the most evil man, who his husband has been tasked to eradicate. This perspective of her gradually changes as the plot moves. Dev Pratap, just like Ethan from The Searchers, does everything possible, like torture, raids, police brutality, to get back his loved ones. But it doesn't delve much deeper inside him, as he's just an embodiment of an idea, something we see in many movies trying to adapt the story as a whole. An important aspect of Ram's character is that he's inherently a radical thinker, a gentle in the time of brutes.
इस लड़ाई को मैं अभी भी रोक सकता हूँ.
So everyone who connects with him are mostly the ones who didn't fit with the normal world. So being a misfit is subconsciously an essential quality of being Ram, while Raavan has always symbolizes order. But here, Ram follows order. But what it does well is really highlighting the heart of darkness aspect of the story, as Dev really ventures into the jungle quite like Apocalypse Now, and Bira is shown in the same light as Kurtz. You could say Mani Ratnam chose the Coppola or Milius way of adapting the material. But where this version really let down was the Hanuman aspect of it. He's mostly used as a comedic relief, which frankly this version didn't need it. He could have rather shown him as a new officer who joins Dev, a good guy who has to come to terms that police force is not such a good job. Then it would have been seen as a deconstruction of fandom around these jobs. Adapted from a French fable by Gabriel Villeneuve, written around 1st or 2nd AD, called Cupid and Psyche, Belle is a woman ahead of her time. The one who wants to marry her is also the most perfect man in the eyes of villagers. While physically superior to everyone, Gaston is mentally no different than them, as he has similar and regressive views about women. The boon that Raavan got is subverted here to be a curse, which can only be broken through true love. A line that Tamil version was scared of crossing, since it adhered to the material too sincerely. This one understands what the princess needs to be for it to work. Which brings me to The Hidden Fortress. The 1958 epic by legendary Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa was an interesting take on the princess itself. It starts from the point of view of Tahe and Matsichi, who are going to accompany Rokurota Makabe, a legendary general, as he awaits from enemy forces to restore his princess Yuki's kingdom. It's like watching the point of view of common monkeys on Ram's side, showing how the greatest victories are won on the back of common people. It's more about survival and reclaiming the power rather than rescuing Sita from the captivity. Because the princess in this case is a warrior herself, her loyalty to her people and reflective nature of not being able to protect them are the highlight of her warrior nature. Though we have seen this before, somehow this iteration of princess might be my favorite. It's fitting that her final words before dying is a poem about fire that even melts the enemy's heart. No wonder the story inspired George Lucas while writing Star Wars. The treatment of women in ancient times is a recurring theme here. as it was also the focal point of Wolfgang Petersen's 2004 epic Troy, an adaptation of the first Greek epic Iliad, the sequel to which is being made by Nolan. Troy's impetus draws inspiration from Ramayana, but with a twist. The princess is not abducted,
What about the love for your country?
but leaves of her own will.
You'd let Troy burn for this woman?
This isn't just a normal subversion.
I won't let you start a war for her.
It serves as a lens through which the story diverges from Indian epic.
Careful, boy. My mercy has limits.
From this point forward, every element reflects this shift.
And I tell you now, no son of Troy will ever submit to a foreign ruler.
We see an honorable brother, a loyal husband, a caring father, a just king, and the thriving citizen of Troy. This makes me wonder, are we viewing the world through the perspective of villains of this narrative?
Then every son of Troy shall die.
While war is waged by Agamemnon, the emperor of Greece, to get back his brother's wife, it's Achilles who is protagonist for the most part, as he is his champion. Similar to Arjun for Yudhishthir or Indrajit for Raavan. Devdutt Patnaik writes, "The killing of good Hector, who fights for his family despite all their faults, inspired Michael Madhusudan Dutt to write the Bengali epic, Meghnad Vad Kavya." Meghnad, who was son of Raavan, had remained true to his family despite their many flaws and is killed by Lakshman unfairly. In the oral tales based on Ramayana, Sulochana, Meghnad's widow, goes alone to Ram's battle camp to fetch the body of her husband, just as Priam goes to Achilles to retrieve the body of his son Hector. Achilles has defeated his son in a hand-to-hand combat before the walls of Troy and dragged his body back to his camp behind his chariot, which is also the best scene in the movie. Peter O'Toole creates an island of drama, who at night ventures outside his walls and into the enemy camp, surprising Achilles in his tent. Now he asks him,
"He deserves the honor of a proper burial, you know."
This scene is given the time and attention it needs to build its mood.
"Give me this small mercy."
And we believe it when Achilles tells Priam.
"You're a far better king than the one leading this army."
And that brings me to the most important differentiator between our stories and their stories, which is also evident in their cinematic portrayal. Many European Orientalists believes that there is much in common between Greek epics and Indian epics. But they fail to notice that in Hindu epics, women are not treated with disrespect and made captured to serve as concubines. The treatment of conquered land and women in Greek epics is remarkably different and quite barbaric, angering even the Olympians. All these films learned something from its predecessors and still found new and inventive ways to say something unique. But there are also some reimaginings that learn nothing from the past. It isn't that these films are not adapting Ramayan's focal points, they somewhat do, but the films are more interested in you knowing that it's adapting the source material than actually doing it.
आपको seriously ऐसा लगता है कि राम जी सीता माँ को लेने all the way लंका गए थे?
And that feels insincere. I mean, Shrek and Mario also did it, working their modern aesthetic in an ancient setting. Even though they keep telling you this ain't your grandma's fairy tale, it works because as a whole they are a parody of these old tales.
I will ask their princess to marry me in a fairy tale wedding!
Which isn't the case for Singham again and Adipurush. They are glass onion at its worst. For Singham again, the best parallel should have been Django Unchained. Schultz tells Django about an old German fable of Brumhilda, who was punished by her father by imprisoning her on a mountain with a fire-breathing dragon as her guard. A hero eventually rode through the flames to rescue her. The characters themselves only highlight this once in the story, and we the audience remember it for almost 3 hours. Or even RRR, which does something similar in the context of Indian mythology. But this film understands none of this.
Of course. It's a fact.
Ironic even with 9 writers. They never stick to their original idea. You know why? Because there is no original idea.
वो महात्मा गांधी का आदर जरूर करता है.
The only idea is to use whichever, whenever to make whatever possible.
लेकिन पूछता छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज को है.
It's fandom exploited. They want to prove the greatness of it by shoving it down your throat. This is the exact reason why no one has been able to make a compelling adaptation of it for the big screen. Because they don't savor the inner workings of this character.
But even enemies can show respect.
For some, there are means to show their hero's greatness. Few checkpoints to cover before he beats an evil foreign villain. They don't want to understand who these giants were in the context of their time and era, ignoring that every generation in every culture has always known this story, passed down by their ancestors. Those giants don't need our token appreciation. Their influence has already crossed cultural and language barriers. The story of Ramayana, in its true sense of the word, is immortal. I hope that both the adaptation we get to see next year surpasses every film I mentioned here, and we get to see the first proper adaptation of Ramayana on the big screen. Thank you.